Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, and welcome back to myself as well, of course. It's been quite some time. I've missed you all very, very much. I've missed my service to my community, and most importantly to the divine source creation, to all things, because that's what this is about. This is service to the divine, and that's something that's really been strongly on my mind, actually, and in my heart. There's a lot to talk about. I'm going to try and just summarize as much as I can. For me personally, I've been, into the underworld the last 5 weeks, Pluto, and the eclipses have been the source of energy and portals that have actually triggered everything in my chart like Christmas lights. So there's been a lot going on for me. It's been very difficult. It's been excruciating. It's been painful. It's been all those things. So without going into all of that, because I don't really like to talk about myself very much. I don't like to talk about my private life. It's my private life. So whilst on the one hand, I like to share astrological stories and symbols and things like that for the purposes of, just all of us learning through different experiences. I'm still a very private person. So, I've got a lot going on. I've had a lot going on for a very long time, and I still have. So those eclipses, though, the solar eclipse we had in April, and the one that we are stepping into now in a couple of days' time, which is the lunar eclipse at 25 degrees of Scorpio, both those eclipses actually hit off things in my own chart very strongly. Now, that's probably a really good point to unpack a couple of things around that. And that is to say that we have eclipses every year. So we don't always have activations from eclipses, okay? We certainly, the lunar eclipses particularly, will probably, feel the emotionality of that experience. But the solar eclipses are the ones that tend to be the more cataclysmic type in nature. And I've seen this over and over again through the years in famous people's charts, in just people I know, family, friends, whomever. So if we had, solar eclipses and lunar eclipses activating everything in our chart every year, we probably we'd be going through these intense cataclysmic nature of events all the time, and that wouldn't make sense. We're not supposed to go through those cataclysmic, intense periods of life 24/7 for our entire life. We wouldn't be able to cope. The human component of us wouldn't be able to cope with that level of change, transformation, deaths, endings, and being confronted with your own personal limitations and fears, and all those things that tend to come up, particularly when you're talking about Taurus Scorpio polarity. A lot of those themes are very much connected in that in those archetypes. And the other thing is, so eclipses don't affect us all the time, is what I'm trying to say. But when they do activate something in your chart, it's usually reflected through a number of other things that are going on as well. So in my own chart, without going into specifics, the planet Uranus, the planet Pluto, the planet Saturn, and the eclipses are all doing, extremely intense things to my chart. So it was inevitable that I was going to go through a really intense journey. I wasn't really prepared for it, though, even though I had the insight and sort of I knew this from a while ago that this was all coming up. And that's the learning in life, right? That's the learning in astrology as well. You can't always know exactly, to the absolute core and detail everything that's going to come up. Because, we are different at different times in life. We are different when we are a teenager. We're different when we are an infant. We're different when we are, in our 30s, in our 40s and 50s. There's different things happening in our life relative to our external life and also our internal life, and our own soul's unfoldment in its evolutionary path. So all these details, all these elements contribute to how an eclipse is going to impact your life. One other thing that I wanted to point out is the last time we had this lunar eclipse in Scorpio was in 2003. So it is really worth, if you're old enough, going back to 2003 and tracking, what was going on in your life then, because there's going to be a very similar energy. It's in fact, it's going to be the same sort of energy, but of course, different details, different context, different sort of circumstances to an extent. It will also bring up very similar themes, and that's because the Scorpio eclipse will be in the same house that it was back in 2003, 19 years ago, right? So the themes that are highlighted will be in the two houses of Taurus, Scorpio, right? So wherever Taurus, Scorpio is for you. So it is always worth, looking back to see what happened. I mean, I can tell you just very briefly, in my life, 2003, there was, cataclysmic events going on again. It was very similar themes, actually, but also very different as well. But it did bring in the themes that correspond to the two houses in my birth chart where the Scorpio and Taurus axis actually sits. And yes, it's got to do with home, because I have Taurus in my fourth house, right? So it's had very much to do with literally the physical home, and also personal family matters as well, and things of that nature. So it just sort of really blew my mind when I thought about that, and I thought, wow, 19 years ago, it really was a fundamental, crucial shift in my life where, it was a literal, well, not literal, but it felt like a death, like a complete death, and a rebirth into a completely different sense of self, right? And the same thing has happened again 19 years later. So it is the finer sort of tuning and the finer details of these sorts of things that can help you make sense of eclipses. And if indeed they are activating things in your chart, they may even, you may not be one of those people that the Scorpio Taurus axis, is really highlighting a lot of things in your chart, right? You may or you may not be, but with Taurus and Scorpio, we're always dealing with attachment, Taurus, and rebirth, death, Scorpio, and how we can actually, how do we find a new sense of sustainable values, if you like, Taurus, that speaks to the present and the future moving forward, that is realistic, that is grounded, that is also fresh and new as well, because Taurus, remember, we're talking about fixed energy, right? Taurus is the most fixed of all the signs, without a doubt, 100%. So Taurus can really struggle to let go of anything, a person, an item, an idea, whatever it is. So Scorpio is very brutal with those sorts of attachments, because the way Scorpio evolves and transforms and finds new life is through brutally cutting through, all the attachments that are no longer able to serve you on your path in evolution, on your path in growth and development, on your path with your own heart and soul. Because We are always becoming and evolving. A lot of things appear to look the same on the surface level, whether you're looking at the external reality or whether you're looking at an individual. And that's, I think, a lot of that has to do because the external reality is so defined by Saturn, which is limits and boundaries and lines and doors and walls and, just things that Saturn defines everything, right? So when you're looking at things from the exterior, it could look like not much has changed for a person. Think about a suburb that you've grown up in. It might be one of those suburbs that hasn't changed for 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. That's a very common thing because it's very Saturn. This is a Saturn reality. But when we're talking about the inner change that goes on through the different processes that are very critical, because we don't really notice a change, let's say, through periods of life where we are feeling, really happy and joyous, and everything's kind of really relaxed, and you don't really have many challenges, or you're not confronted by things, or you're not faced with your own personal limitations. You just chilled out and you're having a good time. You don't really notice changes then. We notice change when we have to make change. And with Scorpio, especially, we have to make change. Scorpio is not going to be lenient. It's not going to be soft and kind. It's going to be quite brutal, and it's going to kind of rip you open and take you into that deeper space where you need to actually look at what it is you are ready to change and to move on from, to release and to let go. That's, that attachment, rebirth is a really challenging experience, I think, for most human beings, because the nature of being human is very much a space of wanting security and safety, and wanting things to kind of be familiar. And so you get these lunar and also with these solar and lunar eclipses, in 2022, they are all of them are in Scorpio Taurus, and that's not an accident. That's a pretty significant coincidence, if you want to call it that. I don't believe in coincidences. The word coincidence breaks down into coincide, which means two things coming together at the perfect time. But the point is that with Taurus, Scorpio being so prominent in 2022, we are being really pushed to look at those Scorpio Taurus themes and the houses they correspond to in our birth chart. And Scorpio will drag you into the underworld. It's just the nature of Scorpio. It's not kind. Definitely not kind. But I guess, for me, I'm a Venus Scorpio star point as well. And the soul that I am, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, incarnated to experience every emotion to the absolute hilt. So I am an extremely emotional and sensitive person, and feel everything, to its maximum level. And sometimes that can be, extremely blissful, and sometimes that can be excruciatingly painful, right? There is no in between for me. Scorpio is all or nothing. And I totally resonate with that level of embodiment with every experience I endure, whether that's good or bad, just to use simple language, although nothing in truth is good or bad in essence. Everything that comes to us is, very simply put, is an opportunity for us to grow. That's all it's about. But when I think about Taurus Scorpio as well, I think of the Hindu goddess Kali. She's the pictures that you see of her are, a lot of people find them quite scary. I don't, because I'm used to the Hindu goddesses. I've done a lot of study on all of that and so on and so forth. But she's the goddess. What was the words here? I just wanted to read these words. Considered to be the master of death, time, and change. And I think that encapsulates her, goddess Kali, and that encapsulates a lot of what the Scorpio Taurus polarity brings up in us, in whatever extreme or context or capacity that is. Obviously, that's going to differ for all of us. I think what I'd like to do is just bring up a chart. So I've just sort of, just made a few comments just to get people to think along the lines of understanding that not every eclipse is going to be major for you, but it might be. It depends on a number of different things in your chart. Okay, it's just an important thing to remember, because the amount of transits and things that are going on at any given time, there are so many of them. Now, if every single one of them, with all the different variations and possibilities, were having a direct impact on every single one of us all the time, well, I guess we would be like completely insane. we wouldn't be able to cope. All right. So there are different things happening for each of us. Now, as I said, think back to 2003 and think about what was going on in your life then. If this Taurus Scorpio polarity is significant for you, you will definitely be able to identify something from 2003. I certainly can, 100%. If you don't have the Taurus Scorpio polarity particularly emphasized, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be impacted by these eclipses or feel them. You will, because this is, first of all, it is a collective movement and transit of energies and patterns of the nodes, which do this cycle every 19 years, right? So there's something shifting and evolving every time we get the nodes back into Taurus and Scorpio, for instance. So 19 years later, 2022, we have them there again. So that's a collective evolutionary transit or portal of energy. So there is change going on collectively. There is change going on within all of us. But then when you want to fine tune it and personalize it, you need to start looking at these other levels and layers. Where is the chart? I think that's it there. So, yeah, so Mercury is, just went retrograde recently. I've recently started considering some other thoughts around, well, you've all heard me talk about the Venus star point. So that concept, which is a Sun-Venus cazimi conjunction, can be applied to any planet with the sun. So you could see what your Mercury cazimi conjunction was before birth, and the element it was in and the sign that it was in, and you look at that chart as a standalone chart, and you might be blown away with what you see. Now, that concept can be applied to, as I said, any planet forming a conjunction with the sun in terms of the cazimi, which is the exact conjunction, right? But I'll come back at some point, hopefully, and give some examples of that and talk about that a bit more, because it's something that I've been thinking about lately quite a bit. So, in other words, like, one small takeaway from that would be, so for me, I've got Mercury in Aries natally, right? And when I go to the Mercury star point before my birth, it's actually in Pisces, which makes complete sense to me. It makes complete sense, for reasons of which I won't go into right now. But for me, it was, quite a significant shift, from areas of fire into water, which makes complete sense to me anyway. Okay, so let's have a look at this chart and possibly just make just a few more comments. So there's the full moon, obviously, which is opposite the sun, and conjunct the south node and opposite the north node, which is what a lunar eclipse is, right? The sun has to be opposite the moon and the nodes need to be there as well. That's what creates an eclipse. Saturn is actually forming a square to both the sun and the moon, so we have a T-square. Now, the solar eclipse that kicked these energies off last month, which was in Taurus, was conjunct Uranus. And that was just so cataclysmic for me. That was so just, it's just mind-boggling what happened. I'd love to share the details of what happened, but as I said, I'm a pretty private person. I don't like to put everything sort of out there, but I might come back and just do a few points if I can. But the eclipse, that was Sun Uranus conjunction, the solar eclipse, that couldn't have been more literal. There's a beautiful cloud forming that looks like a bit like a bird or an angel. It's massive. It literally looks like a big spaceship. I'm just noticing that. Very interesting. The thing about Uranus, its energy is just mind-boggling. But one thing I want to say is that Uranus, out of all the things that you know about Uranus, which I'm sure many of you know a lot of things, and just to name, a few themes, disruption, uncertainty, unexpected, whatever, could be anything, completely unexpected things happening, turbulence, just shakes the foundation that it just rips everything up and just throws you into a tornado. So it's a very, very disruptive energy. And the other thing about Uranus is that it can, in the same way that it can suddenly create this sort of eruption or disruption, it can just as quickly turn things around in the complete opposite way. So, and that's exactly what happened to me. It was just mind-boggling what happened. And now the lunar eclipse, which is forming a square to Saturn. So the energies of these eclipses, are holding the energy of Uranus and Saturn, two very different forces, right? And we've had the, Saturn-Uranus square, all of last year, and we know what all that is about. But the energy, of Saturn Uranus they're still square each other by sign, okay? And they are connected to these solar and lunar eclipses. So in other words, they still have more to add to the story of the transformations that are taking place on the earth plane and the transformations that are taking place within ourselves. Uranus is about authenticity, being able to live an authentic life, be who you are, be yourself. And of course, Saturn is the establishment and government and so on and so forth. But it is also you, it is also the structure that you create and build in your life. It is the lessons and karma. It is the growth and development. It is the maturity and responsibility. It's all those things. So, you know, at the moment in Melbourne, there are protests today, and that would be highlighted by this lunar eclipse squaring Saturn. Okay, the moon is always reflective of the people, and Saturn, of course, is the establishment, and we have a square here, so there is tension and conflict, of course, because there's people protesting in the city, and with protests, you know, there are always unexpected things that occur, and there was something that occurred today. In fact, it was really it just was not a good thing at all. Fortunately, no one was severely injured, but you know, a truck decided to drive through the crowd and just push people out the way. I mean, you know, these are just things people, I think, temporarily go a little bit insane, you know. Anyway, so the Saturn, you know, squaring this lunar eclipse, I think holds a very specific place in, well, just thinking about it from our own personal context, it's, you know, there's Saturn is always a very difficult energy. It's very difficult to make Saturn light because there's nothing light about it. But when Saturn influences something in your chart, or when it's influencing an eclipse or whatever it may be, it might bring up the fears or limitations or resistances. And for a lot of people, they will be able to get to the other side of that, right? And identify what the benefit of that was. It doesn't feel like that when you're going through it. When you're going through it, it feels like you're being grinded, you know, just something's just grinding you down. It's a really heavy energy. And I know because I've had it on my moon as part of everything else that's been going on. So, you know, at best, Saturn is offering us the opportunity to see how mature and developed we are in our journey. You know, how much are we taking responsibility for ourselves in our life, right? How much are we projecting and blaming and so forth? Interestingly enough, the matters that I've had to deal with the last 5 weeks, it just boggles my mind, you know, that I've been dealing with companies, individuals, multi-million-dollar company trying to rip me off in relation to rent and bond and stuff like that. It's just the stuff that's gone on is just really, it's Saturn. It's Saturn at its worst, actually. And, you know, when you're dealing with individuals that are very unconscious, then you're only going to get a response of, when they've made an error, they're not going to want to be accountable for it. So they're just going to palm it off or palm you off onto the next or the next or the next. And that certainly was my experience. So the more we push Saturn out there, the more we are going to have this sense of limitation or restriction or resistance that corners us. And Saturn rules corners. And it's when you're cornered, it's a very uncomfortable place to be in. And typically what happens in us, we get into this fight, flight, reactive sort of mode, right? Because when you're cornered, it feels like you're going to be attacked. And I know exactly what that feels like because I've had a very terrible, unfortunate experience in a workplace where that happened to me. And the trauma that can happen out of that is quite severe. So with Saturn, we have to learn what we have to learn with Saturn's lessons that Saturn is trying to teach us. And I think when you have, a lunar eclipse with Saturn there, it is going to be a difficult full moon, if you like, because it is a full moon, that's what it is, but it's a total lunar eclipse. So total lunar eclipses are just completely amplified on that emotional level. And so with Saturn, wedged in there, forming this square, there can be some particular separations that occur, right? That may end up being the right thing for you, the perfect thing for you. Saturn might end up being the advocate that helps you cut that cord, create that separation. That's the healthy level of Saturn, So anyway, it's not an easy lunar eclipse. It's, Scorpio, moon in Scorpio, full moon in Scorpio, total lunar eclipse, incredibly intense emotional energies that that can take you into those deeper layers of the fabric of your being, that ultimately will show you what needs to be cut and released, what needs to die and end. So the thing that I like about this eclipse is that its rulers, which are Mars and Pluto, Pluto forms a sextile aspect, okay, and Mars forms a trine. That's very, very, very beneficial. Trines and sextiles are an ease and flow of energy. They create support. They create things falling into the right place at the right time. They create help. There's no resistance. Things naturally just fall into place. So I do like that Mars and Pluto have really good aspects to this full moon. It really shows that, Mars and Pluto rules Scorpio. So the necessary purging or transformation and separations that might take place will be facilitated in a helpful way through the powers of Mars and Pluto, the two planets of will power, the soul's will Pluto, and the personality's will Mars. So I think that's very, very helpful for this lunar eclipse. What else did I want to say? I didn't want to stay on too long for today. Of course, Neptune is also trine the full moon, and of course, sextile the sun. So the full moon is picking up some beautiful aspects by Neptune, Pluto, and Mars. The hard aspect is the one from Saturn, and that's probably going to be felt maybe more, perhaps, because it is a square. A square is crisis. You can't not feel it. You can't just block it out and say, well, I'm just going to take Mars and, Neptune and Pluto. Saturn is there. He's got a purpose. He's got a presence. He's got a voice. And the best we can do is listen to our own self, what we actually really need at this time. Taurus is our needs. Sun's in Taurus, North Node in Taurus, Moon in Scorpio, South Node in Scorpio, what we really need to let go of, what really needs to die, be removed. So yeah, they're just a few sort of comments that I wanted to make about this lunar eclipse, and just be mindful that it is a lunar eclipse full moon, so it does stir us up emotionally. The emotional body can get quite charged. We can get quite reactive. There's a lot of that always that goes on. Mercury is retrograde, so I actually love Mercury retrograde. The only time it really bothers me is when it messes with, technological stuff, your computers and text messages or whatever it may be, when there's miscommunication or you lose emails or you lose this or you lose that. Well, that's just extremely inconvenient, right? But that's all it is. But Mercury retrograde is fantastic for review, mental review and revision, and changing your mind on things or making up your mind on something. It's the best time to actually be doing it when Mercury is retrograde. So I actually love Mercury retrograde. In Gemini, it's going to be very interesting. Lots of, Mercury is in rulership in Gemini, and Mercury in Gemini is just, it's not short of any ideas. That's the beauty of this. We can come up with lots of sort of brainstorming and different thoughts and different ideas, and perhaps in a situation that we couldn't find a different way of looking at things previously, but now we're able to rethink and revision, come up with lots of different ideas. Depends where Mercury is retrograding in your natal chart, and what it's doing to everything else in your chart, etc. Jupiter, of course, has gone into Aries. I want to come back and talk about that separately. I think I've touched on it briefly, but I haven't really spoken about it in depth, and I'd like to. I'm really excited about Jupiter in Aries. I think that's that's just going to be sensational for courage and new beginnings. Anyway, I'll come back and talk about that because there's a lot of things to say. Okay, I'm going to sign off for now. And I hope you guys enjoyed what I shared with you today, and I will see you as soon as I can, hopefully with Jupiter in Aries. So much love, much blessings, and happy lunar eclipse, and I hope you are all doing well, and love to hear from all of you. Just pop your comments below and I'll do my best to respond to all of them, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, bye.